And good morning, my beautiful America. Welcome back to the All American Book Club. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in the powerful month of May. We are celebrating so many things here at the All American Book Club, America 250, the month of the military spouse, the powerful women who have served, who have gone before us. And we get to bring a very special treat to the show this morning. Author Becky Aikman. She has written the powerful book Spitfires. It came out last year, but it is so timely. Again, it's Spitfires for those who are listening in, but also for those who are watching on the YouTube channel. Can I please recommend, please go pick this powerful book up. Amazing stories of women who went before us to serve, to break the sound barriers, to break all of the rules of being women during World War II. So please help me welcome to the show fellow Pennsylvanian Becky Aikman. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, I love the book. And I first want to hear the inspiration behind this book. What led you to these 25 powerful stories? How did this all come to be for you?
Like many inspirations, it came from my mother.
Oh,
I was talking to her about how I would like to do a book about people who did something amazing, but no one has heard about it. She immediately said, write about the American women who flew in England during the war. Uh, I had never heard of this. I assumed she had it mixed up with something else. That did not go over well with my mother. She had been a very young child during World War II, and she remembered seeing, she thinks, a newsreel at the movies about these American women who flew in England during the war. She said, I thought they were so noble and glamorous. I wished I could do what they did. So she had remembered it all those years, despite the fact that pretty much everybody else forgot this story, even though these women were really quite famous at the time and quite celebrated for their brave service. Somehow, because they weren't a part of the usual pattern of history, their story had fallen by the wayside over the years. It took me quite a while to find out that my mother was even correct, that there had been such a thing. I contacted a little museum in London, outside London, for this organization, this auxiliary of the Royal Air Force. And I asked, were there American women who served in this? And the gentleman who ran the museum said yes. And he gave me a few names, and that's what got me started.
So, out of the few names in the book, there's a lot of names in this book. Do you have one particular favorite that really inspired you as you were writing it? Because there's so many favorites, but they all have their own stories.
Yes, it's very unfair of you to ask for my favorite because
I had to.
I just loved these characters. There were a total of 25 women who went and served, and they served because they were pilots, and the US military would not accept women pilots then. But they did hear that Great Britain would accept foreigners and women to fly aircraft from the factories where they were being produced at a rapid pace to the airfields and then fly the damaged aircraft back for repair. It was one of the most dangerous jobs of the war. 1 in 7 people who did this were killed. Many others were injured, and just about everybody was in a situation at least several times where they had to make spectacular saves. And
Mm,
this was
yeah.
because the aircraft were not in the greatest condition. The flying conditions were poor. They had to fly without instruments. And they also had to fly up to 147 different models of the latest aircraft with very little training. This meant all the state-of-the-art bombers and fighters that were crucial to winning the war. So I got off the track a little bit about who
You're
my favorite
fine. You're
was
fine.
because I don't want to say, but these women I love because they came from all different backgrounds. They're in all different levels of American society. There was one pilot who only had an eighth grade education, who was working as a flying instructor, but she was very beautiful. Her name was Dorothy Fury, and she also had a very imperious attitude toward people. So when she went to England, people there assumed she was an American aristocrat because most women who could fly over there came from well-to-do families. She was invited everywhere with the one dress she had with her, and eventually made her way into the very heights of British society because she met a millionaire lord who threw a ball for the entire airbase just so he could meet her.
Mm.
But then there were people at other levels. So I love her because her character had such a fascinating story through the course of the war. There was another American who really was an American aristocrat. She was an heiress to the Western Union fortune,
Mm.
and her family expected her to be a debutante and marry into the heights of American society, but this did not interest her at all. So going off to the war helped her escape this gilded cage and become who she wanted to be. All of them really changed over the course of the war. But I think maybe for your listeners, one of my favorites was Hazel Jane Raines. She was a pilot from Georgia, and she had worked in air shows before the war, performing amazing stunts that would make the audience scream in terror. Uh, and her one goal was to fly in the military in the war. There was, in fact, a headline in a newspaper about her that said, young woman pilot wants to fly bombers despite male snickers. But she managed to show them. And when she went to England, she had an amazing career. And one of her most dramatic episodes was when she was flying a Spitfire fighter and the engine failed, as they often did in these new, relatively untested planes. It happened right at the moment when she entered a cloud bank and lost all visibility. So everything went wrong at once. The aircraft went into a spin. She was in a whiteout situation where she couldn't correct the spin because she couldn't tell up from down. She finally broke out of the clouds very close to the ground. And thanks to her training in air shows, where she knew how to pull off amazing stunts, she managed to straighten out the aircraft at the very last minute. Not soon enough that she didn't crash, but she crashed into the roof of a thatched roof house, which had 3 feet of hay on top of it, which broke the fall and saved her life, although she was seriously injured. I just love doing this story because you couldn't make it up. They had such amazing adventures, both in the air and on the ground. And they were living the dream, doing what they wanted to do, and helping to save the world in the war. So it was a highlight of all their lives.
I love you open with that story about Rain, and I love what she said her comment was when they went to try and get her out of the plane. Can you share that?
The people in the village where she
Yeah.
crashed assumed that the pilot was dead and went to do the grim task of pulling his body out. When they opened the canopy of the aircraft, up popped Hazel Jane Raines, and she said what they were required to say when they crashed: London, guard that plane.
Yes.
I don't know why, but that's what they were supposed to say. And she passed out straight away because she'd had quite a blow to the head. The local villagers were absolutely shocked that the pilot was alive, that the pilot was a woman, and judging from her southern accent, she was an American. They didn't know what had happened here, but this is what these women encountered a lot in the course of the war. People were not expecting to see them there, and they made quite an impression wherever they went.
Absolutely. So I would love to find out from you, do we have any of them still alive today? I know that there was one that you had talked about. Is she still here?
Yes, there's one of the pilots who is still alive. She is 106, very soon to turn 107.
Oh,
She is still raring to go. Her name is Nancy Miller Stratford. She was one of the youngest pilots, which is one reason she's still alive. But she was also famous during the war for having absolutely steady nerves. Nothing rattled her. She was in so many dangerous, crazy situations, and she always remained completely calm. when I interviewed her, I said, we went over some of these episodes. I said, weren't you frightened? And she said, no, I had a job to do. So I think that's one reason for her longevity. She's not easily rattled. Uh,
Yeah.
she had a really amazing life both during and after the war.
As you've been telling the Spitfires stories, where have you seen it most receptive here in the States? Because they were serving overseas for the Royal Air Force. So my curiosity is a couple of things. I'll ask you multiple and you take it from there. Having done my research on the woman Air Force service pilots who served here and how long it took them to get the veteran recognition status, not until 1977. Did the Spitfires also go through that similar aspect of being recognized? They were Americans who served in the Royal Air Force. How did that unfold for them as the war drew to a close? What was that like for them?
Yes, they actually preceded the WASP in the United States. The woman who led them over to England was named Jacqueline Cochran, and she was a very famous woman aviator who won races and set records. And she wanted to start the WASP in the United States, and the United States resisted letting women fly. So she knew about the ability for women to fly in England and took the Americans over there to lead them, in part to prove that it could be done. They
Mm.
had a stellar record there, and as a result, the United States did agree to start the WASP. And Jackie Cochran came back to lead that organization. But most of the women who went over with her said, we love being here right in the middle of the action in the war zone. And they did not come back. They stayed in England to continue serving. Um, Unfortunately, because they weren't a part of the official US military, they really haven't had recognition. Um, I've only since the book came out been contacted by the Royal Air Force wanting to give them some honors. And I'm going to be speaking on Memorial Day at the Battleship North Carolina in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is the World War II museum for that state. And
Yes.
they want me to speak because they want to honor, in particular, one of the pilots from North Carolina, but all of these women who have been forgotten and want to add them to the roll of honor for people who served the Allies during the war.
So really, you shined a very bright light back in May of last year on stories that really were never talked about.
Yes, it's been such a thrill for me. When I first started working on this story, it was really hard to even find information because
Hmm.
nothing much had ever been written or said about them. The very first thing I did was find the papers of one of the pilots. Her name was Mary Zerbel, and she was one of the youngest. And she was actually quite famous before the war for being the youngest woman flying instructor in the United States at the age of 19. And she was also very pretty, so she was featured prominently in newspapers and magazines posing next to airplanes. She was also famous during the war because she and her fiance became the first serving Americans to marry during the course of the war in the war zone. Um, After the war, she continued to be very well known, so much so that a movie was made about her life starring Lana Turner. Uh, but when I got to the last page of all of her papers, I found her obituary, and it consisted of only 3 sentences. It didn't even mention that she knew how to fly. So that was how the course of remembrance went for these women, from being acknowledged as being heroic and role models to being really completely forgotten. So I immediately vowed someone's got to bring them back to public attention. And I realized, I guess it has to be me. No one else is doing it. So it's been quite a thrill for me and for the families of all the women to have people finally understand what they did and honor them for it.
So I love that you have been able to do that, and I love that there's been such a huge response. Have you also seen with the Women's World War II Museum in DC? Have they also been able to highlight them? Have you seen that in other museums around the nation since you've been shining the spotlight?
I've spoken at quite a few museums around the nation, and unfortunately, they do not have exhibits about this subject. Many of them said, I guess we have to. It takes a while to do that,
Yeah.
apparently.
Yeah.
But many of them do have exhibits now about the wasp, but nothing about this, really.
Wow, so we really need to shine even more powerful spotlight. I want to ask you, as you are seeing this next generation of patriotism that we're seeing in our nation and just reigniting that patriotism, what do you say to the young women of today in regards to some of the characteristics that these women selflessly gave up of themselves, knowing they may never come home? Those powerful characteristics.
Yes, not all of the American women did make it back alive. I, I was so fascinated by them, and I kept thinking, would I have had the courage to do this? It's hard to imagine,
Yeah.
because they knew how dangerous that job was, and they actually had pretty wild social lives when they weren't flying, because, as they all said, the next flight could be their last. I think they did it for several reasons. They did it because they loved flying and they wanted to fly as a career and to prove themselves. That was their personal reason. They also wanted to do something greater for the world at large. And once they were there, I think they almost never felt fear because they felt what they were doing was so important. And
Yeah.
another reason was that it gave them a great adventure. I mean, they were far from home. They were part of this massive war effort. They felt important, they felt accomplished, they had a sense of purpose, and they got to see and do things they would never have done otherwise. So they loved it. And I think, to a person, they all said that these few years in the war were the highlight of their lives.
That is very powerful. I want to ask you, we just have a few minutes left, so I want to just highlight a couple other things. The work that you are doing and just the stories that we are telling, what where can we as a nation come around and surround these families to tell their stories to and make sure we don't forget even modern day. I am married to a veteran spouse. I live in a veteran community, and we can't let those stories go by the wayside because they're so powerful.
I think that's true. And one of my goals in the book was to make these characters really come alive as fully rounded human beings, to understand their motivations, to understand what it took to have that kind of courage, to understand what it took to have that skill that they developed to do this important work. I honestly think they were probably amongst the best pilots in the world at that time, because very few pilots were called upon to fly absolutely any kind of aircraft on a moment's notice. Um, so I think it's really valuable to focus on the people and to tell stories about the people,
Yeah,
not only the larger picture of war strategies and such, but what motivated people to do this, and the impact it had on their lives.
absolutely. I did want to tell you, I didn't mention this when we opened up, but I have seen a Spitfire plane
Ah,
here in the
there's
great.
some around.
There are in the great state of North Carolina, and one of our Air Force bases. There is one, and it's truly an honor to be able to see what they looked like from that time period.
Well, it was an iconic aircraft. It's one reason I named the book after that aircraft, but also the aircraft itself was named after the expression of Spitfire being a feisty woman.
Yes, and I love it.
Both ways. But the women pilots loved flying the Spitfire. It was very narrow cockpit. They felt like they fit in. It was so responsive, so powerful. It was their greatest thrill to fly the Spitfire, which was also iconic for being credited in many cases with helping to win the Battle of Britain, which was a major turning point in the war.
Mm. Well, Becky Aikman, I am so thankful because you have brought another opportunity of a love letter of aviation and a love letter to our veterans to the show. And I just applaud you for shining such a beautiful light on these powerful women and their journeys. And we need to keep telling more of these stories to impact this next generation. They need to hear these stories. So thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Finally, is there a way people could follow you to see your speeches, to engage with you? What's the best way?
Well, my website is beckyakeman.com, my name. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram also, but my website generally updates all of my events that are coming up, although I'm a little behind right now. I have quite a few coming up in the next month, and I'll put them on soon, especially now that you've urged me to.
Well, Becky Aikman, thank you for helping me celebrate here at the All American Book Club, America 250, celebrating our military, our veterans, and just honoring our nation. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for doing this.